Hey guys, today I want to talk a little bit about Strobe2 by F-Expansion, which is an amazing synth. I've been messing around with it for a couple of weeks and I absolutely love it, especially the modulation features. It's super advanced, very cool stuff you can do with it. So I have two examples that I want to show you. In the first example, we're going to talk a little bit about unison. So it's going to be sort of the basics, and then we're going to take a look at a more advanced example. First, I'll play you this sound. So it's a nice, rich sort of chord sound, and I can show you the chords as well. Right there. So the first thing I want to discuss briefly is this master section here, where we have the voices and the unison. Now, this is something that still confuses a lot of people, which is quite understandable because it is a bit confusing, I guess, by nature. Like, we have voices and we have unison, but sometimes unison is also called unison voices. Now, what we have to think about is that these unison voices, they are actually a subset of the voices. To get the actual number of voices, so the actual notes that we can play, we need to divide them. So in this example, I have 8 unison voices, which is a lot, and I have 16 voices. And this means that I can only play 2 notes at a time because we divide these two numbers by each other. So you can see that my chords have 3 notes in them. So actually right now I won't hear this low sort of bass note. So it's actually not playing back that note. So I need to, if I want that, I need to either decrease the number of unison voices so that it needs less unison voices for each note, in which case I will hear my 3 notes. Or alternatively, I can increase these voices right here. So now we can hear that low note. I can drop that an octave. All right, for now I actually like this setting though. I don't actually need to hear my 3-note chords for this example. Because what I want to talk about is just these two, the difference here. So if we take a look at our modulated list, so here we have our modulation slot, and we have basically 2 slots in here. This one where it says 0, we can choose one modulator, and then we can choose a sub-modulator below that, which is going to modulate the modulation amount. That's a lot of modulation. So the first thing we have in the list here is constant, which is just a fixed offset, which is kind of useful sometimes. And then we have our monophonic modulators. We have our performance controls. And here, this is actually what I want to talk about, are polyphonic modulators. And polyphonic modulators, they will actually behave differently depending on like the number of voices and the unison. So specifically, I want to talk about these right here. Well, let's say unison and the voices. So for unison, we have unison 1 plus minus, which means bipolar, and unison 1 plus, which means unipolar. So bipolar, I think you guys know this, but just if I quickly show you an example, if I go for, that was the wrong slot. If I choose unison 1 bipolar here and I assign it to, I don't know, let's say the volume right here, you can see that if I drag this modulation amount up, you can see that yellow bar, we also get that blue bar sort of at the bottom. So that's the negative range. So this modulator modulates both in the positive and in the negative direction. Now if I go for something that has just a plus, it's only going to modulate in the positive direction. All right, so it's pretty straightforward. Then we have 2 different types. That's just a different algorithm for each of these. According to the manual, unison 1 is good or nice for like pan kind of things or stereo widening, and unison 2 is good for pitch kind of stuff. We're going to look at that in a second. So this is for each of the new unison voices. It will send a new value. So if we assign that to something, like the volume, what we have in this case, it means that every note is going to have a different volume, which I don't want. I'm going to remove that again. But then below that we also have voice, and this is for the actual voices. So this will actually send a new value for each of the new MIDI notes instead of the unison voices. Right? It makes more sense when we actually start to use this. So let's take a look at the first one, unison 1 bipolar. The only thing I've assigned that to is to the panning right here. And let's first remove that and then listen to the sound. Alright, that's nice, but pretty mono. And then if we do this, that's pretty cool, right? So every new unison voice gets a new position in the stereo field, which is kind of interesting. Then if we take a look at unison 2, I've assigned that to quite a lot of stuff. The fine tuning, the detuning, pulse width modulation, and let's remove some of these. Now let's actually remove all of them so we can hear the difference before and after. So I'm going to remove those, and there, and there. So that's without that, only a little bit here on the pulse width. That's not a big deal. Now the first and probably most interesting, or most used at least thing, probably not the most interesting, but this is a very common one, is to use one of these unison voices to modulate the fine tuning. So that way every new unison voice gets pitched like slightly different, which is gonna speed up or slow down the waveform, which is gonna put them out of phase with each other, and that's gonna give that very rich chorusy phasing kind of sound. That's just beautiful. To hear an extreme example of that, we could assign it to just the regular pitch, which will give each new unison voice a new, like it will pitch it up or down a semitone, which is gonna sound messed up. So if we start to think about what we can do with this, there's actually like a lot of cool stuff that is hiding inside these two features. For example, what I did in this patch is that I used these sub oscillators and I wanted a new level of them for each of those new voices. So I modulated these volume sliders of the different waveforms. So that's just going to give you a lot of variation. Now what we haven't talked about is how we can use a second modulator to scale something. So what we could do right now that we have unison 2 assigned to all of these things, is we can click at the bottom half of this modulation slot and we can choose another modulator such as an LFO to modulate that modulation amount. So now everything will sort of be scaled through the LFO and the speed of the LFO. So that's something else I really like. If we want to remove that, we set the constant back to 1. So that's just gonna mean it's just the full modulation amount. Now I have another unison 1 here, which is unipolar, so this is only modulating in one direction, and this is assigned to the filter, which is actually something I want to show in a different patch so that you guys can hear clearly what that's doing. So I'll mute this one and I'll open a new strobe, which I already have right here. Right, so that's our default sound, and then I'm gonna set the filter down a little bit. Let's set it to 20 semitones. We can type that as well, and then I'm gonna take that unison 1. Well, let's first do the other. Let's first set the unison 1 to our panning again to get our nice stereo sound. And then unison 2 to the fine tuning, which is going to make a big difference. But now, the really cool thing here is if we take one of these and we take the unipolar version for that. Let's take unison 1 and we assign that to the filter type, filter mode switcher. So, and here's probably the thing that confuses a lot of people, is that when you look at a filter like this, it just looks like one filter, but actually on the background we have multiple filters working. We have enough to provide us with a new filter for each of the new voices. So if we do this, if we assign the unison to the filter mode, it means that for every note, either in the chord or in your unison voices, you're going to get a new filter type. So sometimes you might get a high pass or a low pass or a band pass, especially if you give it a full range. There's so many creative possibilities with this. So you can hear that some notes, they get a high pass filters, others get a low pass or a band pass. So you get a lot of variation through that. Of course, we can do the same with the actual filter cutoff. So if we now take unison 2 again and then assign that to the cutoff and then scale that through an LFO, we should get some pretty interesting results. So there's a lot of fun stuff that we can do with that. There's one other patch I want to show you, however, which is a little bit more complex, and it's this one. And for this I use the key zones a lot, and actually I see now that my graph that I've drawn here, I lost it, probably didn't save it or messed it up. But what I did for this is I sort of made this MIDI region that we see at the bottom here, which is these long notes and then those smaller melody notes. And with key zone, I separated specific notes out of that. So first, let's start from the beginning. Let's take a look at unison 1, which is controlling the panning, nothing special there. Then unison 2 is controlling the fine tuning. We already looked at that as well. But the key zone here, that's controlling the level of the saw and the square of this sub oscillator. Now, because it doesn't show that anymore, I have to make that again. Basically, the idea is that if I reset this, this is what a normal key map looks like. and it means that this is how your MIDI notes are going to be mapped to the output value. So if your MIDI note is low, like if it's a low note like C0 or something, the output value is low, and if the note is a higher note, then the output value is high. So if you assign something like this to the filter cutoff, whenever you play like more to the right or higher on the keyboard, the filter will open more. Now what we can do with this is we can separate specific notes. So if I reset or clear this map like that, so that there's no value being sent for any of the keys, and then I disable my main oscillator for a second. I just want to listen to this sub oscillator. Right now I'm not hearing anything, and then if I draw a value here, so what I want to do here right now is I want to separate the notes, that only these notes. So I have to play my region and then look at where that line is, which tells you which key is being played. So right there. So if I draw something right there, so now we're going to hear something just for that note. So you can hear that we only hear that note and not those smaller notes. And then here we have a lower note, so that's probably going to be somewhere there maybe. Alright, I can be more precise about this, but it's good for now. So now basically we're playing like this note, and I think we're catching that C as well right there, but we're not playing all these high notes. So we only hear the saw and the square for those notes, which is kind of interesting already. So that's why right now if I put in some new notes here, it's not going to make a difference at all, because remember I switched off that main oscillator, so we're only listening to this, and this is being controlled by that map. So then together with our main oscillator again, which is going to play for every note. Then another thing what I did is I took that same key zone and modulated the sync parameter with that. And I modulated that through a step sequencer. So what this means is that for these notes and for these notes only, it will sync that main oscillator. And because this is all polyphonic, we actually don't hear the sync on those higher notes, even though the notes are playing at the same time. So if I increase this a little bit, we can hear the effect of that better. That's giving that sort of high, sharp sound. On top of that, that's being controlled via the step sequencer, which is this guy right here. Basically meaning that it's only going to modulate that sync if the step sequencer is on a high value right here. So you can actually hear that a lot better when I just play this. So a lot of interesting things that you can do with that. But we're not there yet, but almost. Now I'm going to take a look at the curve settings. So this is another interesting one. So these curve maps, I'm not going to explain that much because they're already explained as well. But basically what I did is I've set up one of these maps, and I controlled that with a scale node. Now scale node is another one of those typically like F expansion modulators, which is I think it's brilliant. But what this one does is it will send a new value for each note of the scale. So knowing that, what I did is I modulated the input of a mod mapper or a curve processor to that. And I basically made sure that I had a couple of different versions. You don't necessarily have to put this map in between. After that, I assigned this to the LFO rate. So the end goal of this was to get a new rate for each of the new notes. So every note is going to have a new rhythm. Now this LFO, just like all the other things, is also polyphonic. So instead of just having one LFO, we have multiple. We have as much LFOs as we need, basically. So if I input new notes here, they will re-trigger that LFO with a new rhythm, because it's being, that rhythm or that rate speed is being controlled through the skill node. So that's why we get some really interesting like rhythmic examples. So if I put this in like new positions, it's gonna create sort of these polyrhythmic patches. So you hear that instead of having one rhythm, you actually have multiple rhythms for each of the new notes. So if I disable this right now, if I, a quick way to do that is set the constant to 0. So now they're all just playing quarter notes, because that's the slowest rate here. But if I enable that, we get different notes. And then the very last thing what I did is if we enable the effects, I took another curve processor, curve 2, and I've modulated that with phase. So phase is another one of those things that I didn't find in a lot of other synths. These phase, where you can find them right here, they you can consider them to be like sort of small LFOs with a fixed rate. So they just listen to your song, and like one bar in your song is like a full phase cycle repeat, which is something that you can see a lot better right here. So if you look at the map, you can see that this input value right here, that's the phase. So you can actually see it moving right now, and I think it's moving every, yeah, it's cycling every bar, this phase 2. And then if you have phase 1, it cycles every quarter note, I believe. Yeah, I think that's every quarter note. So if I go to that one again, so the only thing I'm doing here is I'm looping every bar this mod map. But because I changed this, like by default, this looks just like that, where the input value is mapped to the output value. But if I change it like this, then we'll only get some modulation towards the end of the bar. And I use that to modulate the effect mix right here. So you can see that like at the end of every bar it's modulating the mix up, which goes to like a pattern delay. So that's when we get, at the end of the bar, we get sort of a new effect added. So we can have, we could add other effects there as well. We could try a distortion, for example, which sounds kind of interesting. So I really like that sound, and I just wanted to show you like some of the techniques, because it can be pretty overwhelming looking at all of this stuff. So I wanted to give you some ideas. The power in Strobe is really thinking of things that you can do with this. And if you look at it, you might think, all right, we just have one oscillator, a sub oscillator, we have a filter. There's not much to it. But if you consider all these modulators, you can make like very, very new modern sounds with this that you cannot make in a lot of other synths. Besides that, it sounds freaking amazing, just the quality of it. So definitely mess around with these modulators, and the more you work with them, the more ideas you'll get from them, which will pretty quickly turn this into your favorite synth, I think. It did for me, at least. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in a new video.
The Pyramind Mentorship Network connects you to experienced professionals for truly customized private training in music production, sound design, music business, and more. Use our scheduling tool to select the type of training you want, pick your mentor, find a day and time that works best for you, then book your session. Your appointment will be confirmed instantly. Study only what you want, progress at your own pace, pay as you go, and do it all from the comfort of your home or studio. Our global network of industry experts are here to help you. Visit pyramind.com/mentorship to get started.